Recording. I'm gonna let everyone in. We only have 40. I'm so sorry.
No, no.
And this was a topic that they've been requesting forever.
That means that I can answer questions, and I can even click through a good bit if they have questions and stop.
Yeah, and we may do this again as a just because it has been requested so much. And I want to get enough people here. But anyway, I'm gonna let people in.
Mhm.
Welcome, welcome, welcome in everyone. Welcome to Care Concierge with Care Patrol, where education is the heart of everything we do. If you're not familiar with Care Patrol, we are a assisted living placement agent. We help families who are in the throes of healthcare woes find out where is the next stop, what's the best location, how do we get there, what does it cost? And we do all of that at no charge, just like we offer these CEUs to you. In the case of our work, we're paid by the providers, but it doesn't mean that we limit to only those providers. It just means that's how we earn a living. We're so happy to have you here today. This has been an oft requested topic, which is supervision in social work, and we'll probably offer this again maybe soon, just so that we make sure everyone gets it. Hello, Miss Hurd, and greetings to you. It is a beautiful day today. Um, we are accredited by the Alabama Board of Social Work and also by the Alabama Board of Nursing. And each of them say that today's course is worth 1.0 contact hour. If you're new to us, you must complete our password protected evaluation today before 8 p.m. in order to receive credit for this course. And it's 1.0 contact hour for both disciplines. Um, we are very happy to have you add your voice to ours. Our presenter today is Dr. Kwajalein Nicole Brown, who holds a doctorate in social work from USC and is a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed clinical supervisor. And she has been a very popular presenter with us. We're happy to have her back and welcome her in here. If you have questions or just enter things into the chat room, let me read for those of you that are not looking at your screen. Let me read for you our evaluation link so that you can write it down. It is https colon // www.surveymonkey.com /r/ all uppercase letters L W Z as in zoo H K V as in victory Z as in zoo. That's our valuation link. We give our password out at the end today, and in that way, we're able to represent to the Alabama Board of Social Work that for those of you who are social workers on this hour, it is a live hour, just like a classroom hour, and you'll get credit for that versus having it be a recorded hour. So without further ado, let me open the floor up to Dr. Brown. Thank you so much for being here today. I've been excited about this topic in particular and can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Okay, well, I hope that everybody else will feel the same way. Feel the same way. What I want to share with you is how I implement assessment not only in my own clinical practice, but how I guide those under my supervision to do the same. Sean asked a very important question about what was the difference between social workers and counselors, and hopefully this will help answer some of those questions. But I did say that one of the differences is what we learn in school. We learn some of the same theoretical frameworks, but most times counseling is considered something that would be short term and doesn't cross barriers and boundaries, where social work would be one of those things that can be considered long term and does cross barriers and boundaries. Barriers and boundaries is what I explained to Sean would be helping a child get adopted. Well, a counselor wouldn't do that. A social worker would, and we not only would work with that child, but with the family, and we would do provide some assessment with making sure that those things get done. And so we'll get into how those things are done. Okay, so we're going to start out with basics. And the CSWE gives guidance for undergrads, graduates, postgrads, and supervision students. And so that's why this slide is here, is because the CSWE is the national association that is representing social work education in the United States, with over 900 accredited bachelor's, master's, and doctorate programs. And it is the sole accreditation agency for what you will learn for graduate, undergraduate, postgrad, like I said. And then the NASW would be providing guidance for all licensed social workers who are currently practicing. But if you are not licensed, you are held to the same standards, and you are required to abide by the guidelines that and govern yourself accordingly. But as far as this particular situation is going, because I am a licensed therapist and I supervise those are trying to go on and get their clinical practice, what I use is CSWE guided information along with NASW. Okay, so assessment should be collaborative and include the client and the family if that's applicable. And an example would be the initial assessment of a client that may be struggling with addiction. But the CSWE also requires that programs to assess, the student learning and the outcomes of the assessment, and what the student is going to be learning, and the competency, right? So for the definition of assessment for NASW, I won't read it, but it talks about gathering all your information and analyzing and synthesizing all that data that you collect, which includes the strengths and the needs and the challenges of the person that you're working with. And so CSWE goes further, and it just gets into the nuances of what assessment would look like, what gathering that information would look like, what synthesizing would look like. And as a supervisor, it is my objective to teach all of my supervisees as if they were students, and to evaluate their ability to practice and assess, how they work with clients. And so that's how we kind of start about the foundation of what I do with supervisees. So the role of assessment in clinical practice, and what is it? Assessment forms the foundation for clinical intervention, and it guides case formulation, the treatment plan, the goals, and the process of gathering and analyzing all that information. An example would be a client that is depressed, and we're going to use the biopsychosocial framework. I wanted to make sure that I said that the NASW encourages the use of ethical-based interventions to not only evaluate but assess social work practice, and that we are advised to incorporate validated tools and interventions that have been shown to improve client outcome, and to evaluate those outcomes as such. So the purpose of assessment Um, it informs all stages, the diagnosis, the intervention, the evaluation. It ensures that the interventions are tailored to the individual client's needs. So there is no one size fits all. And this is what it's about. This will ensure that the practice will have what the client is looking for and what the client needs. And so an example is when you adjust a treatment plan, and it's based on your assessment of what you found through your investigation of what your client was needing. So key principles, it's collaborative, it's continuous. We're using strengths-based perspectives and making sure that we are culturally respectful, responsible, and resourceful. We're going to involve our client in the entire process to ensure that we're making sure that not only are we assessing and we're giving the client what they need, but we're not to impress upon our thoughts and our feelings about what we feel our clients need. So you're always thinking not only about what you think they need, but listening to them, what do they say they need? Okay. The NASW Code of Ethics is very extensive. It is our ethical obligation to have informed consent, and provide confidentiality, and to have professional integrity. But then we're going to be balancing our expertise with our client's autonomy, which is what I was talking about in the last slide. And if you recall earlier, I spoke about the CSWE and the core competencies. Well, I highlighted number 7 because it talks about assessment. And as a clinical supervisor, my contractual obligation with the person that I'm working with is to teach you what I know about clinical practice and assessment, and to help guide and shape your practice. Therefore, in this situation, you are the student and I'm the teacher. And it is my duty to impress upon you the importance of critical thinking and collecting and analyzing, assessing that data, and coming and formulating your own, your views. Competence assessment requires social workers to apply critical thinking and engaging in cultural humility, because we don't know it all, but then also to use those evidence-based tools. And that we understand that it's an ongoing component of the dynamics. It's interactive. The social work that we understand the theories for human behavior, and to use those in the person and environment, and to use that also in the interprofessional conceptual frameworks that we have, and that we critically evaluate all the knowledge that we have, of course, to use that culturally responsible, and that we develop a mutually agreed upon plan. You'll probably hear me say that again. That we are to recognize the implications of the larger practice context and assessment, and to use interprofessional collaboration in this process, to continue to be self-reflective, and to understand how our bias, power, privilege, personal values all come into play here. And we are to teach and help our supervisees, or I would, to understand how to apply those theories, and how to demonstrate respect for client self-determination and collaboration. Okay. So this is not to insult your intelligence, but if I'm going to tell the story, I gotta tell the whole truth, and I've got to tell it all to you. And it starts with theory and the frameworks that you use to gather your information. because if you don't start on a sturdy foundation, you'll have to start over. And you don't want to start over, especially when you're trying to build rapport with clients. And there will be an opportunity this is the opportunity for you to collect your data at the beginning, to develop your psychological assessments, the summary, and to clarify your diagnosis. And the first state is rapport building. And you want to gather that information and to start doing your assessment from there, but you have to build a trustworthy foundation and be mindful of how you greet people, how you stay cognizant of your client's comfortability, and to be mindful that you are using the correct theoretical framework. You definitely want to do that. Okay, so we're starting with basics. This is kind of social work 101. The biopsychosocial is the first conceptual framework. It was altered from the biomedical because it was dominant at the time, and they did some tweaking to it because it was very narrow and dehumanizing to the patients. At least that's according to literature. So the breakdown is, you're using the biologicals, the psychologicals, the social components. It's a holistic view and understanding of your client's challenges, their strengths. The biopsychosocial model is a holistic, and it understands and treats the person as one person and thinks about their well-being as well. And it recognizes that a person's biological, psychological, and social factors are interconnected. That's why they are like that in the link. And it considers factors like physical health, mental health, environmental health. And an example of this would be a client that you have with diabetes, but they're also depressed. And so the biological issues can impress upon their mental health issues and vice versa. Okay, the ecological model focuses on the interaction between individuals, their environment, and considering systems theory. It emphasizes person and environment and understands how internal factors such as family, work, and community impact mental health. So we're going to be looking at interdependence, because interdependence is considered here. And it assures that it says that people are interdependent on their societal issues, and they must be addressed by considering all parts of the functioning person. It's multiply environmental, and it takes into account groups and environments, their workplace, their neighborhood. So you're looking at all the different things that go into what happened to this person. So you may look at this when you're looking at someone that's incarcerated, newly incarcerated, or someone that is going out back into what I would call, I'm thinking general population, meaning transitioning back home, but it's also holistic. And you're also doing some advocacy here and thinking about the influencing environmental forces that are going on here. And you also should be thinking about policies and the services that will be going on with this person. Okay, so this would include the interpersonal, the community, and policy. Back up. Okay, making sure. So the strengths-based assessment, kind of what is think you kind of find the strengths that you can find in that particular client. Sometimes you have to pull it out, sometimes you don't. But here are some of the questions that you can ask. And this slide talks about what the focuses are. The strengths-based perspective is also collaborative, because you're asking this person, what do they feel are their strengths? And you are looking for those, and you are asking what other people think about them. But it focuses on identifying and leveraging their inherent strengths and shifting from a deficit-based model that recognizes resilience and potential. So you're looking for the potential in the client. An example would be a social worker that is assessing a trauma survivor and focusing on their ability to seek help and the resilience. The NASW advocates for empowering all our clients and focusing on their strengths, and involving the client in those processes and considering the whole person, setting goals, and using assessment tools like the Clifton Strengths Assessment. Okay, so here's another. This is the trauma-informed care model. And this talks, just like it says, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. This is their model, and it is another evidence-based, and it recognizes the prevalence of trauma and its effects on mental health and behavior. And it has 6 guiding principles that talks about the safety, the trustworthiness, peer support for that particular client. Okay, so our DSM in clinical assessment, it is critical for diagnosing mental health disorders, and it's used to structurally assess around symptomology and symptomology identification and diagnostic just criterias. You would use this if you're thinking about it to diagnose generalized anxiety disorder in a client, and to assess whether, what their worries are or what their degree and symptomology of worry is. And you want to be mindful to be culturally sensitive when you're using your DSM so that you're not misdiagnosing. Okay. The use of validated tools is for the empirical evidence. It's supposed to support your clinical decisions. So, for instance, you're going to use your PHQ-9 to assess depression and the severity based on the evidence that you have. And then also your PHQ-9, you can give this can be a self-assessment for your clients. And the CSWE emphasizes the need for integrating research into evidence-based practice. So the PHQ-9 has a lot of evidence behind it that your clients are self-assessing themselves. So you can either do this one or two ways. You can ask the questions, and if they don't understand, the context, you can give them a little information and help them fill it out. But for those that are higher functioning, you most definitely can give it to them, and then you go over it with them. And then provide them the information, like, okay, according to your PHQ-9, this says this. This is what this is where I assess you. Do you agree? This is a good way for you to start the assessment process and then the evaluation process too. Do you agree? To what degree? Because sometimes people will take these valid tools, especially as PHQ-9, and they'll go, well, dang, I didn't realize this, or this. I didn't realize I was that depressed. I didn't realize I was that anxious. Because some people just hold it internally, not really thinking about it. And some people are so used to having a higher level of anxiety that when they have to see it on paper, it's like, wow, I didn't realize I was, at that level. So use the standard tools and assessment. They're going to be validated. They're going to be reliable. They're going to be appropriate for that demographic, right? One of the common tools is going to be the Beck Depression Assessment, the GAD-7, the ACEs is another. Like I said at the top, valid, reliable, appropriate. So culturally, you want to make sure things are culturally appropriate and fits the client's background. We want to avoid over assessing and using inappropriate tools that could be harmful. So I'm trying to think if I can think of use something very quickly about whether it be culturally appropriate. You probably wouldn't use um, an ACEs on a small child, right? That wouldn't be age appropriate. Depending on if that person, say for instance, you're using an ACEs, but that person doesn't speak English, you definitely would not use the ACEs in English for that particular person. Just an example. But the avoidance of overusing the psychiatric assessments with clients from communities that may view mental health differently due to cultural stigma. So there are a lot of books that would talk about cabaret or using Hispanic cultural assessments when those were not valid based on, you know, what their particular beliefs were. All right, so the application here is that we are to evaluate practice by ensuring that our interventions align with most up-to-date practices. And we're going to use research databases to make sure that we're using the most up-to-date. The most up-to-date valid practices and the most up-to-date tools. So there are some, like EBSCOhost has is a good one that you can use to kind of run them through. Trying to think, there's one that you can use, the child advocacy database. Trying to think of what the name of it is right now, not off the top of my head, but if you're working with children, you definitely would use their database. All their interventions and scales are up to date. I think it's called Calio. It's called Calio. All right, so let's talk about some tools. So for cognitive behavioral therapy, it is widely researched. Let me go back and say this. I may stay here for a minute just to make sure that I'm very clear and not clear as mud. But CBT is widely researched, is evidence-based, and it looks at the relationship between thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And one of the in which you're gonna commonly use this for is anxiety, depression, and trauma. And you're going to use something like a Beck depression inventory or a GAD-7. The overview of motivational interviewing. You're going to do this for client-centered, evidence-based practice that's designed to enhance motivation for change, particularly with clients who are ambivalent and resistant to change. And often this is often used in substance abuse and health behavior changes, and also can be used in mental health, but you're going to use readiness to change. And then you're also going to be looking at the stages of change too, because that can also tell you and kind of gauge you about where your clients are with change. The overview of trauma-informed care, you're going to use the ACEs, but we're going to use that with people who are old enough to understand the thoughts and the conceptual framework there. You wouldn't give it to a 5-year-old. You would probably you could give it to a 10-year-old, depending. You could give it to a 15-year-old. But you're going to incorporate these evidence-based practices to allow effective assessment, and then use the validated tools. And these are it. All right. Standard tools provide a reliable way to measure client outcomes and assess effectiveness. Again, this is kind of just a remake of the other one, the slide before it. But it basically talks about how you're going to track the changes, and you can give these particular tools repeatedly. So you would probably give it at the beginning of your interventions with your client. And you may want to give it, maybe 30 days in, maybe a 60-day, maybe a 90-day, depending on how long you're working with the client, just so that you can assess how the client perceives the changes in how they're doing based on your interventions with them. All right, so goal attainment and the GAS scale is evidence-based, of course, but it measures the extent to which these goals are being achieved or how the client sees their goals are being achieved. They're talking about in undergrad, graduate, they talk about SMART goals now. And you're looking for how they feel like they're progressing and they're using the goals to provide a framework for evaluating effectiveness in your interventions. Here, we're to talk about respect for integrating culturally identifying their values, their practices, and cultural humility, making sure that we are always being cognizant of that always because we don't want to offend. The role of supervision, supervisors or in supervision, we are providing space to reflect on changes and refine the assessment skills and to address ethical concerns. The NASW talks about highlighting the importance of structural feedback. And a example would be if I were to discuss a complex case with dual diagnosis with a supervisee to clarify what they have assessed and what type of approaches that they are going to be using. So the supervisors or I am going to guide my supervisee in selecting the appropriate tools and addressing their bias and improving the accuracy of their diagnosis. We're going to reflect on, why we're doing it, what we're doing it for, to make sure that you are clear on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that you're comfortable with it. And then exploring any reactions to the assessments or in refining the skills. So supervision and peer consultation is one thing that it's a tool that you can use. When you have a question, when maybe your supervisor is not present or you can't get to them as quickly as you want to. But the NASW recognizes that social workers, we use regular supervision, but also peer consultation. So you're bouncing ideas and questions off of other people as a part of the assessment process. And that the interactions provide for external perspectives, and it can highlight areas of growth and ethical concerns that you never really thought of. So this will provide you with but did you think about this? Or what about that? Because sometimes we get on a one track mind and we kind of think that our way is the best way, but other people kind of give us something else to think about so that, when we think about this critically and not, selfishly, we'll be able to course correct and help where necessary or to change course and pivot when we can, or as soon as we can, as a matter of fact. So our documentation has to be clear, concise, accurate, and we have to make sure that we are being transparent and that we are also, providing information to your clinical supervisor, because you're thinking about this as a supervisee, you're a rider on my license until you are licensed on your own clinically. So if I'm asking for, some clarity, if I'm asking what does that documentation look like, you have to be open and honest in providing that information, because like I said, you're a rider on my clinical license until you're able to take the exam and spread your wings and be on your own. And then you would probably want the same, service for you as well. You want somebody to make sure that they're providing that information to you as well. But the NASW mandates transparency and record keeping. And that if our clients ask to see our records, that we provide them with the most appropriate version of those records that we can. Here's what I mean when I say that. Some diagnosis may hurt, and we might want to make sure that we prep them before we provide that. Proper documentation of a client's presenting problems, their strengths, and their risk and diagnosis and treatment. You don't want to provide anything to a client that they didn't know up front, or you definitely don't want to do that and they didn't know ahead of time, or that you haven't discussed it with them. But also in that same realm, providing information to your clinical supervisor as appropriate and when necessary. So we're going to use client outcomes, client feedback, to determine the success of our assessment and to reflect on whether that assessment led to appropriate interventions, and those interventions produce positive outcomes for our clients. That's what's most important. Being very reflective on that, and making sure that our assessments, when we can, are very appropriate, and that when we need to pivot, that we pivot as quickly as possible so that those interventions and client outcomes are positive. It's very important that we be self-aware, and it is critical in recognizing and mitigating bias in the assessment process, because bias can stem from cultural assumptions, from implicit stereotypes, from personal experiences that we've had, and from even sometimes our clinical judgments. And so we have to keep continually checking ourselves and reflecting on those assumptions of what we think. And, sometimes even using that peer consultation and that supervision to kind of ask them to kind of help check us sometimes if we feel that there's a blind spot that we don't see. So the NASW, I know you're tired of me saying that, they emphasize the importance of obtaining feedback from our clients and regarding their satisfaction and perceived effectiveness of our services. That includes asking clients how they feel about the services, about their progress, and if they feel like they've had any improvement. So in post-assessment, the ethical challenges may come up when the assessment reveals conflicting client needs or recommendations that the client may not agree with. So, we may recommend they go to, I don't know, AA, NA, and the client's like, no, not a quitter, not going to do it. And then at that point, there is a mutual conversation that needs to happen between you and your client. There may be an example of this is when you struggle to balance the needs of the psychiatric intervention with the client's cultural aversion to, say, medication. They don't believe in medication, so you have to pivot there. You may think about something natural. You may think about there are other remedies that you may want to go there. But when those dilemmas come up in post-assessment, you have to be humble and thinking, okay, this is their life. They have a neat right to self-determination. So it's not necessarily what we want for them, it's what they want for themselves. So we're trying to do is help them get to where they want to get, or where they see themselves in the future, and not necessarily where we see them in the future, where we feel like they should be in the future. you could think about that as being judgmental. Just trying to make sure I advanced it. But the best practices in assessment, they're client-centered. They're focusing on the individual needs and their goals. They're ethical, and they ethical dilemmas and ethics. When you think of ethics, just think of the code of ethics from NASW. If you stay within that box, usually you'll be right on target. And that they, meaning the assessments, are culturally competent, thinking about if you don't understand or you don't know that client's culture, it's best to ask that client, because there can be a subset of culture within culture. And it would be behooved upon you to make sure that you understand that, instead of going, oh, okay, well, my client's Black. All Black people do this. My client is Muslim. All Muslim people do this. There are subsets within those cultures, and you would be better off going, would you explain to me, about your culture, about how you go about doing things? How do things work in your family? And use that to be responsive and respectful in your approach. And the supervision and reflection that continues to improve through ongoing learning. I put self-reflection, personal bias, and professional development here because we are continually to reflect on ourselves, how we show up, and then what our personal biases are, and then to go out into our profession and to seek additional information and education about the things that we don't know and the things that we're curious about, and our areas of either expertise or areas that we are wanting to strengthen ourselves in. And I'll open up for questions. Am I early? Yeah, a little early. Is that okay?
We're a little early. We had one comment earlier. Ms. Hurd said she loves using strengths-based assessment in her practice, especially asking client what their greatest strengths are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people love talking about themselves. So anytime you can get people to talk about themselves, and even when get somebody to talk about themselves, and they will kind of help you do your assessment. And then when you have trouble with getting people to talk about themselves, just continually to pivot back to them. This is something that, something's minor that I like, but tell me about you. So sometimes that motivational interviewing will go a long way too. And that kind of helps when the clients are kind of reluctant to provide information. They say they don't have any strengths, they don't know of anything, they don't have any support system. So that's when we use some motivational interviewing and some other tools in our toolbox to help them get to a place of self-reflection and going, okay, I'm not here alone. I'm not in this alone by myself. I always ask people who's in your circle. So I ask about, tell me about your family. But then I also say people have friends that become more like family. So I ask people who's in their circle, who's become more of a friend that's now family, my best friend, your church family, in your particular group. So some people belong to, say, the Sjogrens of America group, or they belong to, if they went to college, say, for instance, I know someone that goes to Tuskegee, and they have like all kinds of Tuskegee groups of people that graduated in this year and this year, and they get together. Well, those are people that are in your circle. And those are people that you can use for reference later, and you can definitely use that during your pulling of information for strength perspective.
Tell me more about motivational questioning. How does that work?
Motivational interviewing is when you have a client that is very reluctant to provide you with information. They are very tight-lipped. They are closed off. They don't really have much to say to you, and they don't have much to say at all. Um, and you should probably most times used in correctional facilities, but can be used with clients that say they're mandated to come, and so the judge made me come. I don't want to be here, so I'm just here because I don't want to go to jail or because I'm trying to get my kids back or something. I'm laughing because usually that's what they say. I'm just here because the judge told me to be here. So I'm here. So whatever it is you're trying to do, what's your question? And so the motivational interviewing is kind of piercing the skin and softening, if you will, like moisturizing the skin, allowing the pores to open some so that you can get some information from them and so that you can move their case along. And sometimes what has to happen is you go, okay, well, I'll just tell the judge that you don't have anything to say. I have to write this report, and this report is going to be very short, and it's going to say, this or that. That can be a part of motivational. Sometimes you have to play the good cop and the bad cop. So the motivational interviewing is basically to psychologically get the client to work with you instead of work against you.
So then in that example, the motivational interviewing technique is to say, if you don't do this, it's going to be worse for you, kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely not. That was my comical way of just giving it to you.
Okay.
The motivational interviewing part would be to you take a big piece. You know how the thought is, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Right.
Well, one bite at a time, I'm going to ask questions that will eventually get you to start answering questions. Sometimes you see this with teenagers. Their mom wants them to come. They don't want to come. They're just here because their mom said. So you start out by asking minor, minuscule questions. Um, tell me about your favorite this. So the motivational interviewing is more so to kind of prime them for additional questioning on the back end. So, you're kind of building, it's more rapport building and getting that client in the mood for it.
Okay. So it's almost a chit chat, but it has a direction.
Yeah. Yep.
I got you. Here's a comment from someone. When I worked in admissions at a psych hospital and had patients who were repeat admissions, one question I would pose is, what is going to be different for you this time? Or what do you hope to change this time?
That's motivational. You're getting them to think about forethought, back thought, why we don't want to come back.
And then Miss Daniel agreed with you with your statement about how often people in jail say, I'm just here because the judge told me. She said, so true. I am a social worker at a prison, and that's what they say, LOL.
Exactly. I like the thought of what makes this time different. Here's my thought on that. That's a great question. But have you ever thought that maybe sometimes people come back because that feels like home? Like some people are repeat offenders and they return to jail because that's all they know. They know 3 hots and a cot. So if jail feels like home and I don't know what it's like to be out here on the outside, I'm going to continue to do things so that I can come back because this feels like home. The social worker, this structured here. I like it here. I know what's going to happen. I know when I'm going to eat. I know that I'm going to sleep, and I know I'm going to be safe. And, there may be some other negative and positive we can say on each side. But I will say, I just thought about that. One consideration would be, does it feel like home?
What a great question. And Miss Hurd agrees. She said, oh, yes, several readmits did say they felt safe in our place. It's their comfort zone. Miss Burrows says they do. Hospitals have also become a, quote, safe space for people with mental health disorders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a safe space. It feels like home. I can get all of the thoughts out. None of the thoughts in my head or the people in my head talk to me when I'm here. And I get my medicine on time when I'm here. So, with that being said, you are my family, my doctors, my nurses, my social workers. You're my family. And because you are my family, you are my squishy, and I will love you.
That's their, what were you saying earlier? You're not your network, but you're not your sphere of influence, but your people, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tell me about your people. Who's in your
Miss
network?
Daniel, who works in the prison system, says a lot of them are homeless, don't have family, friends. What else is she? I can't get this thing to scroll down. Here it is. Or any help. Prison is safe and provides them with basic necessities. I contacted a social service agency today, and due to the town being so small, they have no resources for homelessness.
Mm-hmm. No, not many resources. And because there are not many resources, there are people that will be reoffenders and they'll be frequent flyers because of it.
That's true in rural America, isn't it? Not enough resources in the healthcare sector, particularly in mental health.
Right. And then we have to reimagine what mental health looks like because everybody can't come to Tuscaloosa. Everybody can't come to Birmingham. That's why my particular um, clinical practice is virtual. Because I'll be honest with you, homeless people have phones.
Yeah, they do.
They do. So, I may not be able to go to Indian Rivers or go to these places, but I have a phone. So when I click this button, Dr. Brown shows up on my phone and I can tell her how I'm feeling. And that's it. So it's a convenient, safe place sometimes for people to be. Um, and so, and even in that with the homeless population, have you taken your medicine? Have you, there are things that I do as a social worker, looking at the person and environment and the entire person by using biopsychosocial to ensure that, to the best of my ability that they're okay.
That's so interesting. You're creating a safe space for them that in fact is not a space or a place at all. It's a phone call.
It's a phone call. It's a feeling. It's an experience. I provide an experience for some people that feel safer within their homes, um, to talk about things. I actually hold some of my sessions in my car. No, I'm serious. If my client is in their car, I go get in the car. So we in the car.
Okay.
Yep.
And what
Kind of
technique is that when you're matching their environment?
mirroring. I'm
Mirroring.
mirroring. Yeah, we're mirroring their environment.
Okay.
And so that helps to bring down barriers. And yes, it is called body doubling and mirroring as well. What I'm doing is I am parallel playing with my client therapeutically, of course.
Okay. So interesting to me. We Miss Hurd says, I will take a walk in Alabama. Oh, I missed it. Did you see it?
Who's
I
walking
will
in
take a
Oregon?
walk in
Yeah, the
Alabama
walk and
while I'm
talk.
with a client who's walking in Oregon for our session. That's great.
Yeah, a walk and talk. Most therapists will not talk with clients when they are in motion. You have to be in a stable place, not moving. And I am not a proponent of that. I don't necessarily teach that to my supervisees. Um, I use I use something. I'm ethical, but unethical, but ethical. If that makes sense. It probably didn't make sense to you, Sean. I don't think it did.
Well, I
Like I said,
followed.
okay, so the model usually is you have to be stationary, you can't be moving. But if you understand how the brain works, sometimes the brain works like a computer. You can do something in the foreground and be doing something in the background. So if you're walking while I'm walking, you're talking to me just like I will be walking alongside of you while we're exercising. It's called a walk and talk session. And sometimes it frees the mind up to think more freely about doing things because your body is in motion.
I see that completely. I like talking on the phone while I'm walking my dog. And I also know you can do walking meditation. And I feel like if you can
Mhm.
meditate while walking, you can do anything because meditating is hard. Um,
Meditation looks like a whole lot of things. I do music meditation with my clients and my students. We do dance meditation, because I think meditation is the methodical movement of the body or the silencing of the mind. And you can do both of those things either together or in part.
Uh-huh. Miss Calder says body doubling works when you need to clean your house and call a friend to clean too at their house.
Yep, it sure does. Sometimes clients don't want to hear the things in the background, but you're definitely correct.
Uh-huh. And Miss Hurd says walk and talk was great during the pandemic too. Well, we've
Mhm.
hit our hour, so I'll give you all the password for the day. It's assessment with a capital ASSESSMENT. The evaluation link, one more time, is https://www.surveymonkey.com/lowercase r/ all uppercase letters LWZ as in zoo, HKV as in victory, Z as in zoo. I'm putting this into the chat room for you all. Thank you for your time and attention today. Thank you for the great discussion. And thank you, as always, Dr. Brown. We may ask you back soon to do this again because it was really good.
Problem.
All right. Y'all have a great Monday. Join us 2 weeks from today. We'll have someone from the Alzheimer's Association doing a seminar on effective communication with the dementia patient. So join us on the 21st, and hopefully we'll have our emails cured by then, and I'll be able to email you that as well. Thank you all. Have a great week ahead, a great 2 weeks ahead.